The pines whispered secrets no one dared to hear. Always swaying, even on windless days, their branches murmured stories buried beneath moss and rot. East Haven was a town forgotten by maps and ignored by time, wrapped in a constant shroud of mist that clung to the skin like breath from a sleeping beast. Nestled deep in the northern Vermont woods, it wasn't the kind of place you stumbled upon. You were born there or summoned. At the edge of the village stood the Morwood estate, a Gothic mansion of grey stone and black iron gates that groaned louder than the wind. Generations of Morwoods had lived and died within its walls, and every child in East Haven grew up knowing one rule: never cross the gate after sunset. They didn't ask why, they just obeyed. But one tale stained the village deeper than all the others, one that mothers whispered through clenched teeth and old men refused to name aloud. The Morwood sons, 3 boys born to Eleanor and Ambrose Morwood, vanished on the same night, at the same age, under the same roof. It was the night they turned 7. Their birthdays had always been celebrated together. James, the quiet one with the ever-watchful eyes, Henry, the mischief-maker, wild and smiling, and Thomas, the youngest by minutes but oldest in his silence. That year the festivities were subdued. Servants murmured of omens. The dogs wouldn't cross the threshold. The air hung thick with something that wasn't quite smoke. By morning their beds were cold and empty. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no trails through the dew-covered grass. The doors had remained locked from the inside. All that remained were 3 silver spoons on their pillows, each engraved with the child's name and the smell of burnt sage in the corridors. The police came. Questions were asked. No answers were given. The Morwoods ceased public appearances. Eleanor descended into silence, and Ambrose took to drink and ritual, wandering the chapel behind the manor long into the night. East Haven tried to move on, but the trees would not let them forget. 20 years passed and the story calcified into legend. Some claimed the boys had never existed at all, that they were fabrications to hide a darker truth. Others swore they still heard laughter in the woods when the moon hung low and thin. Children born in East Haven weren't allowed near the Morwood grounds. Most didn't even look in that direction, but every so often someone would glance toward the trees and their breath would catch. Not from what they saw, but from what they didn't. Yet something had shifted. Rumors began anew. A light in the attic. A shadow on the balcony. The gate, unmoving for decades, was seen ajar. And then came the whisper, moving through the village like a chill. She's returned. Eliza Morwood. The girl who had vanished from public memory, now a woman carrying the family name like a shroud. The only one left. And as she stepped through the iron gates for the first time since childhood, the forest leaned forward. The fog deepened, and East Haven held its breath. If mysteries haunt your soul and secrets thrill your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more haunting tales. The carriage wheels creaked over cracked stone as it climbed the path toward the Morwood estate. Eliza sat in silence, gloved hands folded tightly in her lap, a single trunk beside her. Her face betrayed nothing, but her eyes, dark, steady, wounded, reflected the mist curling through the woods like smoke from an old fire that never died. She had not set foot in East Haven for 20 years. The driver said nothing when he stopped. He didn't ask if she needed help, nor did he wait for payment. He simply tipped his hat and turned the horses back toward the village road, eager to leave the threshold of the old house behind. The heavy gates stood open, rusted hinges still wet from the morning dew. Eliza stepped through them, like crossing into a memory she had locked away with iron and shame. The house had not changed. Its windows, like blackened eyes, watched her with the same cold detachment they had when she was a child. Ivy strangled the stone walls. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the call of a distant crow and the sound of her boots on gravel. Inside, the dust had claimed dominion, white sheets draped over furniture like shrouds over corpses. The scent of aged wood, forgotten paper, and something faintly sweet, like dried lavender laced with decay, lingered in every corner. A caretaker had kept the basics intact, but the house still breathed with abandonment. The hearth was cold. The mirrors were covered. She moved with quiet purpose, her mind a fortress. She had not come for nostalgia. She had come for answers. The staircase groaned beneath her weight as she climbed to the second floor. Each step echoed like a question she wasn't ready to answer. She paused before the nursery door. Her hand hesitated on the knob, but then she pushed it open. 3 beds, untouched. 3 small chairs. Faded toys sat in corners where light no longer reached. On the wall, a mural of painted stars and trees had begun to peel, revealing pale plaster beneath like bones under skin. In the center of the room, the old rocking horse still stood, still tilted slightly to one side, as if frozen mid-motion. She crossed to the window, where curtains hung limp and yellowed. Beyond the glass, the forest loomed, closer than it should have been. As a child, she remembered it farther away. Now it seemed to press against the house itself. On the floor beneath the middle bed, she found a wooden box. Inside, marbles, a tin soldier, a feather, and a scrap of paper folded tightly. She unfolded it with care. "James says the man in the mirror talks to him at night," it read in childish handwriting, "but only when we're all asleep. He says he's not scared, I am." Her heart skipped. She sat on the edge of the bed and closed her eyes. The walls around her began to whisper, not in sound, but in memory. Laughter, footsteps, the soft hush of lullabies. Her brothers had been so alive, so real. And then, gone. She opened her eyes and looked around the room. On the wall above the fireplace, symbols had been carved. Faint, crude, but deliberate. Circles within circles, intersected by jagged lines. She didn't remember them. They hadn't been there before. A draught brushed her neck. She turned. The door creaked open on its own. In the hallway stood a man, tall, ancient, eyes like melting glass. His beard was white, his coat too large for his frame. He tipped his hat slowly. "You're back," he said. Eliza rose. "Do I know you?" He studied her for a long moment. "Enoch Teller. I served your grandfather. I was there the night it happened." Eliza's pulse quickened. "What do you want?" "Not me, child. The woods. They remember you." And without another word, he turned and walked down the corridor, vanishing into the gloom like smoke drawn back into flame. The candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that crawled across the nursery floor. Eliza knelt where the box had been, her fingers tracing the grain of the wooden boards. Something about the floor beneath James's bed felt uneven. Her palm hovered, then pressed. Hollow. She retrieved a fire iron from the hearth and began tapping gently. The third plank gave a different tone, a dull, muted thump. She wedged the iron beneath it and pried. Dust spiraled upward as the board lifted, revealing a shallow cavity no more than a few inches deep. Inside lay a single object, a tarnished silver locket, crusted at the hinges, tied with a red thread. She pulled it free, brushing away grime. The initials J.M. were engraved on the back, James Morwood, her brother. The locket clicked open with resistance. Within, 2 tiny portraits. James's face on one side, a woman on the other, pale, solemn, unfamiliar. Not their mother. The hair on Eliza's arms rose. She took it with her to the study downstairs, placing it on the desk as she examined it more carefully. The woman's portrait was hand-painted, detailed with care. Her eyes were dark, her expression stern, almost accusing. On the back of the frame, barely visible, was a carved symbol, a spiral intersected by a line, the same as those in the nursery. The grandfather clock struck once, though the hour was not right. Eliza looked up. The hallway beyond the door was darker than before, as if the house itself had dimmed. She stood, senses sharp, and moved toward the stairs. Her footsteps echoed differently, an unfamiliar depth to the silence. At the landing, she paused. The nursery door was closed now. She had left it open. Downstairs again, the main hall greeted her with cold stillness. A creaking sound came from the parlor, slow, rhythmic, like a chair rocking. She approached, every step deliberate. No one was there. But the chair rocked gently, forward and back, without a breeze to guide it. She froze, heart beating in her throat. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence after was worse. She turned toward the hallway, only to find Enoch Teller standing there again. "You found it," he said softly, eyes on the locket still resting on the desk. "Why was it hidden?" she asked. "Because Ambrose feared what it meant. The signs were already appearing." She swallowed. "What signs?" Enoch stepped forward, voice low. James began to speak to someone in mirrors, said the man promised him gifts, whispers of a world beneath the roots. At first they thought it was imagination, but then the animals started to die. The clocks moved backward. The boys would wake in the middle of the night screaming words in languages they never learned. Eliza stared. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "You were too young, and they believed if they sheltered you, you'd be spared." She looked down at the locket. "Who is the woman?" Enoch hesitated. "Her name was Odella. She came from the old country with the first Morwood patriarch. A guide, or something darker. She died before the Civil War, but some say her presence remained, tied to the bloodline." The candle sputtered beside them. "There's more beneath this house than stone and wood," he continued. "Your grandfather knew it. So did Ambrose. That's why he sealed the rooms, buried the books, burned the tapestries." "Did it work?" Eliza asked. Enoch met her gaze. "Does this house feel like it's resting?" They stood in silence. Then, from above, a sound, footsteps, small, soft, hurried, across the hallway above them. Eliza turned her head slowly toward the stairs. "There's no one else here," she whispered. Enoch said nothing, and then came the whisper, barely a breath. "Eliza." The whisper echoed through the stillness like a match struck in the dark. "Eliza!" She froze at the base of the stairs, ears straining. The voice had been unmistakable, soft, boyish, trembling with familiarity. A chill coiled around her spine as she took a step upward. Behind her, Enoch did not follow. As she climbed, memories flooded back in fragmented bursts. The laughter of her brothers, the way James always reached for her hand when the hallway grew too dark, how Henry's giggles used to echo into the nursery walls, while Thomas simply stared at nothing with two old eyes. She paused on the landing. Her fingertips brushed the wallpaper, floral, faded, but her small palm print was still faintly visible from years before. Her 7th birthday had been the last time she saw her brothers. She remembered the cake, 3 sets of candles, the scent of clove and rosewater. But she also remembered the silence that fell when the sun dipped below the tree line. That day, the household had been uneasy. Servants whispered. Their mother had stayed behind locked doors, her rosary clenched so tight her fingers bled. Their father paced the chapel, muttering to himself, clutching a tattered book bound in something darker than leather. No one explained why the celebration ended before dusk. She remembered sitting on the nursery floor in her red dress, watching her brothers build towers with blocks while wind battered the windows harder than it should have. There were no storms in the forecast. Still, the sky had turned black far too early. That night the fire in the hearth died on its own. The lamps refused to light. The rocking horse began to creak without being touched. And then their grandmother appeared, Odella Morwood. No one had said her name in years. Eliza hadn't thought of her since childhood. But now in the silence of the upstairs hallway, the memory returned with brutal clarity. The woman hadn't aged. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight braid, her face as hard and dry as oak. She entered the room without a word, a silver bowl in her hands. The boys stopped playing. Eliza remembered the way Odella looked at her, past her. She spoke in a tongue none of them knew. A string of syllables that sounded more like breathing through teeth than actual speech. James sat straighter. Henry shivered. Thomas smiled. The bowl contained something dark. Liquid? Smoke. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Eliza had tried to run. Her legs refused to move. Her brothers stood and approached the bowl in unison as if pulled by strings. Odella's chant grew faster, breathier. The air thickened. The walls bled shadow. And then, just as suddenly, the room was empty. No Odella, no bowl, no brothers. Only Eliza remained, curled in a corner, her voice gone, her body cold. The red dress stained with something that hadn't come from her. She opened her eyes now, standing in that very hallway, and realized she had stopped breathing. The door to the nursery creaked open slowly. "Eliza." The voice came again, and this time it was unmistakable. "James." She stepped inside. The room looked unchanged from hours before, but the scent had shifted. No longer musty and stale. Now it was lavender and blood. The fireplace was lit. She had not lit it. On the mantel sat 3 silver spoons, just like the ones left on the boys' pillows 20 years ago. She moved closer. Each one was engraved: James, Henry, Thomas. Her stomach turned. Beneath the 3rd spoon was a folded page, yellowed, torn, familiar. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. On the 7th cycle the blood awakens. The line must offer. 3 shall open the door. 1 shall walk through. A 4th line had been scrawled in fresh ink beneath the others. And the 4th shall remember. The fire behind her crackled louder. She turned, and there, for the briefest second, reflected in the glass above the hearth, stood 4 children. But only one had eyes that looked back. The night deepened. Moonlight filtered through broken panes, casting fractured light on the walls. Eliza stood frozen before the hearth, the ghost of those children still flickering in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of something unspoken settling inside her chest. She needed answers. By morning the fire had died, leaving only cold ash and silence. Enoch was gone. Whether he had ever truly been there, she couldn't say. His presence always felt borrowed, as though he were something left over from another time. Eliza dressed and stepped out into the garden, the overgrowth parting like it remembered her. Behind the estate, past a line of gnarled yew trees, sat the old chapel. Its steeple sagged. Vines curled around the entrance like fingers clinging to a secret. She hadn't been there since the funeral of her grandfather. The door protested as she pushed it open. Dust choked the air. Light seeped in through stained glass windows, painting the pews with bruised colors: deep red, cobalt, sickly green. A narrow aisle led to the altar, where a cloth had long rotted away, revealing splintered wood beneath. She moved with quiet purpose, her footsteps muffled by decay. Behind the altar stood an armoire. It had once held hymnals and scripture, but when she opened it there was only one item inside: a large, heavy-bound book wrapped in crimson velvet. She pulled it free and laid it across the altar. The cover bore no title, but when she opened it the pages crackled like brittle leaves. The handwriting within was ornate, looping, ancient. Latin. She recognized enough from her childhood lessons to grasp fragments. Names, dates, symbols, offerings, the Book of Offerings. She turned the pages slowly, eyes scanning for anything familiar. Then she found it, a list of names. Each one followed by an age and a date. Some were crossed out, others underlined in ink so faded it was nearly illegible. The names went back centuries. Many bore the surname Morwood. Her fingers trembled as she turned the next page. James Morwood, age 7. Henry Morwood, age 7. Thomas Morwood, age 7. Each entry listed the same date, their birthday. Each name was underlined in red. But there was more. Beneath the boys' names, a new entry had appeared. Not faded, not aged. Fresh ink, sharp and wet to the touch. Eliza Morwood. No age, no date, just her name. She recoiled, heart pounding. The ink hadn't been there moments before. It pulsed faintly on the page, as though written in blood not yet dry. Her breath came in short bursts. The air around her thickened. The chapel seemed to shrink. She backed away from the altar and the book, but her eyes stayed fixed on that single damning line. As she turned to leave, she noticed something she hadn't before. The far wall, behind the organ, bore a tapestry half-burned. Only a corner remained, but it showed a tree, twisted and black, its roots coiling around a ring of children in red robes. Above the tree floated a faceless figure, arms outstretched. The same spiral symbol was stitched into the tree's trunk. Eliza's legs moved on their own, carrying her back through the chapel doors and into the sunlight. She gasped the moment she was free of the building, as if the very walls had been crushing her breath. Back inside the house, she placed the Book of Offerings on the study desk and stared at it, It stared back. She didn't know what it meant, how it had written her name, or why it waited in silence now. But one truth had crystallized in her mind. The sacrifices had not ended. The ledger was still open, and the ink had not run dry. She wasn't just searching for what had happened to her brothers. She was part of it now. Word of Eliza's return had spread through East Haven like frost creeping across glass. By the end of the week, villagers no longer spoke her name aloud. They turned away when she passed, windows shut. Children were pulled indoors. It wasn't hatred in their eyes, it was fear. At the general store, the old shopkeeper refused to sell her candles. Said the flame might invite things back. She left empty-handed. Later that day, a note was slipped under her door. No handwriting, no signature. Just 3 words, scratched in charcoal. They see again. That night, the forest moaned. Eliza stood at the balcony of the manor, staring into the trees. A strange hush had fallen. No birds, no insects. Only the faint rustle of something moving far too deliberately to be wind. From deep in the woods a light blinked. Then another. Then 3 in a row. She stepped back. The next morning someone pounded on her front door. When she opened it, she found a tall man in a dark overcoat, eyes red-rimmed, jaw clenched. The Reverend Nathaniel Brant. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past her. She followed him into the parlor, where he paced like a caged beast. "They've come back," he said. "I saw the signs." "What signs?" Eliza asked. "The ash tree near the chapel split overnight. The well by Miller's farm overflowed with black water. And 3 birds flew into my window, snapped their necks all before dawn." Eliza said nothing. He faced her, voice trembling. "You opened something." "I didn't open anything. I found a book. My name was already in it." "That's what they want. Recognition. The moment you acknowledged it, you fed it." She stepped closer. "You know what this is. Tell me." He hesitated. Then, in a whisper, "The Watchers." She waited. Old spirits. Older than the church. Older than names. They don't speak. They observe. And when the veil thins, they choose. Choose what? Who passes through and who doesn't come back? Eliza's skin prickled. "You believe they took my brothers?" "I believe your family made them promises, and the debt was never paid." A knock interrupted them, soft, slow, deliberate. They turned. At the door stood a woman, tears streaking her cheeks. In her arms, an empty blanket. "My daughter," she whispered. "She was just in her crib. I left to fetch milk. She's gone." Eliza's stomach twisted. Brant moved to comfort the woman, but she backed away, pointing a shaking finger at Eliza. "You brought this. You brought it back." And she fled. By dusk, the village square was silent. A meeting was held at the church. Eliza was not invited. She stood on the outer steps, listening. Whispers. "The Morwood curse. She should be cast out. She's a doorway now." Brant emerged an hour later, face pale. "They want you to leave," he said. Eliza looked at him, calm. "I'm not going anywhere. The ground here is old. The people, older in fear. They remember things you've tried to forget." "I didn't come for them," she said. "I came for the truth." He nodded slowly. "Then you'll find it, but not in East Haven." She tilted her head. "In the hills, past the pine ridge. There's a clearing where nothing grows. That's where the choosing begins. The place they call the Eye. What will I find there?" Brant looked toward the woods. "Either a way forward," he said, "or a way out." That night, Eliza sat in the nursery, staring at the locket. She traced the spiral carved in its metal, feeling it hum beneath her fingertips. Then, on her wrist, just beneath the skin, something itched. She rolled up her sleeve. A mark. Red. Circular. Shaped like an eye with no iris. It hadn't been there before. She closed her eyes and listened. The house was no longer breathing. It was watching. The mirror had not been there before. Eliza was sure of it. As she passed the west wing hallway, once sealed, now oddly ajar, she caught the glint of glass reflecting light where none should have reached. Drawn as if by tether, she stepped through the arched doorway into a room she did not remember from childhood. The air was colder here, older. Dust motes danced in sluggish spirals, disturbed only by her breath. There were no furnishings, no windows. Only mirrors, tall, slender, wall to wall. Their frames were carved from black walnut, etched with runes that curled like vines. Some mirrors were cloudy, others cracked. None showed her reflection correctly. She moved to the nearest one. In it, she stood as she was. But something was wrong. Her eyes were pale like glassy marbles, and her mouth moved soundlessly. She stepped back. The image remained still for a moment too long before blinking on its own. A whisper slithered through the room. Not words, just breath, brushing her ear. She turned. No one there. The next mirror showed her as a child, standing barefoot in the nursery. Behind her, 3 boys, her brothers, smiling. Then slowly the image darkened. The boys began to fade one by one, like dust dissolving in water. Eliza's child self turned to the camera slowly, tears streaming down her face. The mirror cracked down the center. She staggered backward. A soft sound drew her to the far wall. There, a mirror larger than the others pulsed with faint light. This one was different, oval-shaped, encased in iron, and warm to the touch. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. The glass rippled. Inside, her brothers sat on a stone floor, heads bowed. They looked older than they should have, yet small and broken. James lifted his face. His lips moved. The words came in her ears, as though spoken beside her. "Eliza, we're still here," she gasped. Henry looked up too, his eyes sunken, voice weak. "You found the book, it's waking them." Thomas said nothing. He only stared, his mouth stitched shut by shadows. The mirror shimmered again, then darkened. "Eliza." The voice came from behind her. She turned. Nothing. When she looked back, the mirror showed only her own reflection. But something else now stood at her shoulder. A tall figure in a cloak, faceless, fog-like. Its arm lifted, finger extended toward her chest. She stumbled back into the opposite mirror. It shattered. A shriek split the air, high, childlike, drowning in terror. The sound bounced through the room, trapped in every pane of glass. Then silence. One shard of the broken mirror had fallen at her feet. She picked it up. In its fractured surface she saw the back of the iron mirror, not glass at all, but a doorway. A hinge. A gap between 2 worlds. And near its base, barely visible, a seam in the floor. She dropped to her knees, swept aside debris and found it, a hidden latch, worked into the floorboards like a secret never meant to be known. It clicked beneath her fingers. With effort, she pried it open. A narrow tunnel descended into darkness, the air thick with dust and something sweeter, faintly familiar. Like the perfume her mother once wore before madness took her. She paused at the threshold. Something pulled at her mind. A whisper not of danger, but of inevitability, as if this path had always been hers. Before she could decide, the latch slammed shut behind her. She was inside. Darkness swallowed her. And from above, the mirrors sang. Not voices, not language, but laughter. The passage narrowed as Eliza descended, stone pressing in on either side. The air thickened with every step, no longer dusty but warm and moist, like the breath of something ancient. Her fingers brushed cold walls etched with grooves she didn't recognize until a sudden bend revealed a chamber. She entered. Candles lined the walls, flickering to life one by one, as if welcoming her. In the center stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a thick tome. Not the Book of Offerings. This one was older, larger, bound in hide and stitched with wire. The leather was cracked, the title carved into the cover in Latin. She translated aloud, slowly, reverently. Liber Pactum de Sanguine et Umbra. The Book of the Pact. She opened it. Inside, pages swam with unfamiliar glyphs and spidery ink. But the structure was clear. Each page marked a generation. Each generation listed a name, an offering, a result. Her ancestors, going back centuries, had written these entries in blood. One line stood out: Ambrosius Morwood, tres progenies, tres vota, 3 children. 3 wishes. Her father had made a pact. She scanned downward. A final note, scrawled in a trembling hand. 3 for legacy, 1 for silence. A gasp escaped her. Her birth had never been part of the plan. She was the 4th, the silence. No wonder her mother wept endlessly. No wonder Odella had returned that night. Eliza moved to the far end of the chamber, where the walls widened into an alcove. There, painted on stone in rust-red pigment, was a mural, a great tree with a black trunk and blood-red leaves. Its roots formed a circle, wrapping around 3 small figures. Above it loomed a formless being, arms extended, mouth wide, feeding on light. And at the base, beneath the tree, a 4th figure knelt alone, surrounded by spirals. Eliza stared at the child. It had her eyes. Another flicker drew her attention. A second altar, smaller, half buried in rubble, waited near the wall. Upon it lay a bowl, empty but still warm. Symbols surrounded it. Her fingers traced them, and for a moment her pulse matched the rhythm of the carvings. Then she saw the name carved beneath the bowl, Odella Morwood. The implications struck like thunder. Odella hadn't simply continued the pact. She had reshaped it. The sacrifice wasn't meant to appease, but to maintain control. 3 children for 1 promise: wealth, power, protection. But she had woven herself into the covenant, ensuring her legacy as more than memory. Odella had become the conduit, and Eliza, the failsafe. The spell needed blood, a descendant untouched by the ritual. A final seal. But Eliza had left East Haven. Her absence had delayed the pact's completion. Now her return had reopened the channel. The air pulsed again. Behind her, footsteps. She turned. A shadow formed. No body, no face, just a figure of shifting dark and smoke, barely holding shape. It hovered, silent, but Eliza understood its presence. It was waiting for her to offer. To complete what had been left undone. Her hands tightened into fists. "No," she whispered. "Not again." The shadow quivered. She backed toward the pedestal. "You've had your blood, my brothers, my family. You've fed long enough." The darkness coiled tighter. Then she saw it, etched into the base of the pedestal, nearly hidden beneath old wax. To break the pact, the blood must give freely. Not to bind, but to burn. It wasn't about completing the ritual, it was about undoing it, and the only way was sacrifice. Real, willing, final. Her. She looked down at her wrist. The mark had deepened, now glowing faintly red. A key, or a fuse. She closed the book and whispered one name. James. And the candles flickered violently. The shadow retreated, for now. But the pact had not ended. It had merely changed shape, and she was the only one left who could rewrite it. Eliza emerged from the tunnel beneath the manor just before dusk, the stone hatch groaning as she lifted it. She was behind the garden wall, in a place she didn't remember from her childhood, half-forgotten paths swallowed by vines and fog. She followed instinct more than memory, her fingers brushing bark, her steps light. The forest didn't feel like wilderness anymore. It felt like something alive. She passed beneath twisted branches, the canopy above pulsing faintly as if inhaling her presence. Each step deeper pressed the air heavier against her skin. The trees leaned closer. The wind no longer moved freely. It circled her, warm, deliberate, whispering through leaves in syllables she could almost understand. When she reached the ridge, she paused. The clearing stretched before her, an unnatural absence of growth. No grass, no shrubs, just dirt cracked in spirals, stone pillars scattered like the bones of something ancient. In the center, a stone ring. And above it, the trees formed an arch, the eye. She stepped into the circle. A hum resonated beneath her feet, not sound but vibration, pulsing through the soles of her boots into her spine. She dropped to her knees and touched the earth, warm, then cold, then warm again, like a pulse. She closed her eyes, and the forest spoke, not with words but with memory. She saw flashes, her brothers playing among the trees, barefoot and laughing. Then the same scene warped, James turning towards something unseen, eyes glowing white, Henry vanishing mid-step, Thomas standing still, whispering something into the hollow of an old oak. Then her mother, young, fearful, being led by Odella through the very same clearing, clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. A child. Eliza. The spell had always included her, but her mother had run. Eliza gasped, her eyes flying open. The ring beneath her glowed faintly, lines etched into the soil like veins. Bloodlines. A voice rose from the earth, not a whisper, not a scream. Something in between. Eliza! She turned. No one. Yet behind her, the forest parted. A path formed of shadow and memory. She walked it. The farther she went, the darker it grew. Trees loomed like sentinels. The air turned syrup thick. Then, without warning, she entered a glade, and the sounds of childhood returned. Laughter. But warped, too slow, too wet. It echoed in waves. Eliza covered her ears. The sound didn't stop. At the center of the glade stood a tree unlike any other, black bark, twisting up like smoke, its roots above ground, wrapping around stones carved with names. 3 names: James, Henry, Thomas. She fell to her knees. From the shadows stepped figures, small, cloaked in fog. Children but not children, pale faces, hollow eyes. And yet, she recognized them. James, with his quiet gaze. Henry grinning but lost. Thomas solemn as always. They reached for her. She moved to embrace them, but their forms flickered like dying flames. Her arms passed through. Eliza. James's voice was faint. It's not too late. For what? She whispered. To remember, said Henry. Thomas finally spoke, voice brittle. To choose. She stood. Choose what? The tree pulsed. In its trunk a door appeared, not carved but grown, etched with the same spiral symbol. From within came light, golden and flickering. It called to her, welcomed her. Behind her, the laughter stopped. The forest fell silent. Eliza stepped forward, and the tree breathed. The door in the tree swung open without a sound. Eliza stepped through. The light inside wasn't firelight, but something older, pale gold that pulsed with breath-like rhythm. It illuminated a chamber not of wood or stone, but of root. Vast tendrils curved and wrapped into arches, forming a natural cathedral beneath the earth. The air was still, thick with memory. The smell of damp soil and lavender clung to her skin. At the heart of the chamber was an altar of black stone polished like obsidian. Upon it floated 3 spheres of amber, pulsing, flickering, glowing from within. Inside each one, a child. James, Henry, Thomas. Their bodies curled, suspended in stasis, their eyes closed, their mouths moving in slow, silent cries. Eliza approached, trembling. The closer she came, the more the hum beneath her feet intensified. A heartbeat not her own. She reached for the nearest sphere. James. Her fingers stopped just shy of touching. The surface repelled her, not with force, but with a suggestion. Not yet. Behind her something moved. She turned slowly. Out of the roots stepped the being, the observador, not a creature, not a man. A shape clothed in mist, tall and faceless, with dozens of eyes floating where a head should be. They shifted constantly, blinking in rhythm with the pulses of the chamber. It regarded her without expression. Then it spoke, not aloud, but into her bones. You came by will, not by blood. She stood straight, voice firm despite her shaking. I came to take them back. The eyes rippled. The pact was sealed, the offering accepted, legacy given, promise held. They were children, she said. They never agreed to anything. They were Morwoods. A pause. So are you. It stepped aside. A second altar rose from the floor, smaller, with a single bowl etched with her name. Take their place, 1 for 3, the balance restores. Eliza stared. Her heart beat louder than the chamber now. She understood. A trade, her life for theirs. Her brothers would return, whole, free, and she would be devoured. Her breath caught. She looked at the amber spheres again, at James's still face, at the years lost. She whispered, "What if I refuse?" The observador tilted its featureless head. Then they remain, and the pact survives. Their memory feeds the root, and the root feeds us. She felt the forest pressing in, ancient, unrelenting, the bloodline's weight resting on her spine. Then she remembered her father's notes, her grandfather's ritual, Odella's betrayal. All of them had taken, none had given. She was the last. She stepped toward the bowl. The observador watched, unmoving. She paused, staring at her own reflection in the black stone, her eyes wide, her lips dry. Her hand hovered above the blade that now lay beside the bowl, summoned silently. Then, a tremor. The chamber flickered. From above, a cry. Not one of pain, of defiance. James's voice faint. "Don't." The amber sphere pulsed violently. Then Henry's. "We're already gone." Then Thomas. "You don't have to die to save us." Eliza looked up. The boys were awake. Inside the spheres, their hands pressed against the surface, their eyes wide with clarity, their forms brighter, stronger. The observador's many eyes spun faster. "They are bound, your blood is the key, without it the seal holds." "No," she said. "The pact holds because you fed on our silence. That ends now." She stepped back from the altar. The observador quivered. "You deny the balance?" "I change it." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled the locket, the one from beneath the floorboards. She held it high. "I remember," she said, and the locket burst into light. The chamber screamed. The tree above shuddered. And the first crack appeared across the surface of the amber. The locket's light flared, casting elongated shadows that danced wildly across the chamber of roots. The observador recoiled, its form destabilizing, eyes melting into one another, limbs unraveling like smoke pulled through a sieve. The chamber shook. A second crack split the amber surrounding Henry. Eliza stepped forward, holding the locket higher. It pulsed with the same golden hue that lit the tunnel beneath the manor, the same glow that shimmered in the altar's deepest symbols. But now it burned hotter, fiercer. It wasn't just a token, it was memory, and memory was power. "You broke the pact," the observador hissed, its voice no longer measured but fraying. "You unmake what was sealed." "I'm not unmaking it," Eliza said. "I'm reclaiming it." She opened the locket. Inside, the portrait of James flickered, then changed. His face aged, not into adulthood, but into the boy he would have become had time not stolen him. A shimmer passed between the pages of reality. His mouth moved. "Eliza," he said, his voice clear and full of breath. She dropped the locket into the bowl at the altar. The chamber howled, not wind, not pain, a distortion, as if the space itself resisted the shift. The observador lunged forward, its mass stretching impossibly tall, but Eliza had already moved. She drew the blade from the offering stone, not for sacrifice but for severance. The spiral on her wrist flared red-hot. She carved a line across her palm and let the blood fall, not into the bowl but onto the roots beneath the altar. A hiss, like steam escaping a boiling curse. The roots flinched. "Your blood binds," the observador croaked, "but now you burn it. I choose what it binds to." Her blood touched the base of the nearest amber sphere. It cracked in 3 directions. A roar surged through the chamber. The observador shrieked, losing form entirely, its shape unraveling into a cyclone of mist and eyes, flailing as it tried to draw strength from the pact, from the altar, from anything. But Eliza was no longer a vessel. She was the fire. She staggered to the next sphere, Henry's, and pressed her bleeding palm to its surface. It shattered. Henry fell to the ground, coughing, real, alive. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "Eliza," she smiled through tears. "I'm here." The observador coiled violently, eyes spinning inward, trying to reform. A dozen mouths opened in silent fury. Eliza turned to Thomas's sphere. The blood had run thin. Her hand shook. "Now," she whispered. But her knees buckled. Before she could fall, Henry caught her, steadying her. He looked at the bowl. The locket inside pulsed again. Henry took her hand, sliced his own palm, and pressed it against the amber. Thomas's prison burst like glass struck by thunder. Thomas collapsed, gasping. 3 siblings stood. 3 voices rose. 3 memories aligned. The altar cracked down the middle. The observador let out one final screech, now no longer sound, but light inverted. It twisted, recoiled, split. As if the pact itself had turned against its host, Eliza stumbled back. From the ground, the pedestal of the offering ignited in a silent flash. Roots began to collapse. The chamber groaned. The tree above was breaking. Henry looked at her. "We need to run." Eliza nodded. "Go. I'll follow." The boys vanished up the passage. She remained for a breath longer, eyes fixed on the altar, now aflame with pale fire. Then, from the shadows behind her, a voice she knew, low, cold, familiar. "Eliza." She turned. "Odella." Odella stepped from the flame without fear. Her body was untouched by time, tall, stern, wrapped in a gown of deep red. Her silver hair coiled like smoke around her shoulders. Her eyes, black as coal, locked onto Eliza, with a gaze that burned deeper than fire. "You shouldn't have come this far," she said. Eliza stood firm, though her knees screamed for collapse. "You're dead." "Death is only exile for those who fear it," Odella replied. "I remained. Through root, through pact. I became the voice behind the silence." Eliza raised the blade. "You used us," she said. "You fed that thing with our blood," Odella smiled. "No, I bound it, I controlled it. You think you've undone me? You've only loosed the dark. The forest was tamed through my will, and you broke the chain." Eliza's voice shook with fury. "You made them suffer, my brothers, my mother, my father. Legacy demands sacrifice." "No," Eliza said. "Legacy demands truth." The chamber rumbled around them. Roots fell. Flames licked the ceiling. The spiral mark on Eliza's wrist blazed, now pulsing white-hot. Odella stepped forward slowly. "Give me your blood. I will reseal the pact. Spare what remains of your name. I'd rather end it." She turned and plunged her wounded palm into the fire atop the altar. It roared. A great tearing echoed through the chamber. The roots split. The murals crumbled. The tree above screamed, a sound like weeping stone. Odella shrieked, stumbling back. "No, you don't know what you've done." Eliza faced her, tears burning her cheeks. "I know exactly what I've done." Odella's form began to unravel, thread by thread, unwinding into smoke. Her voice grew thin. "They will return. Darkness doesn't die. It waits. And this time," Eliza whispered, "we'll remember." With a final cry, Odella dissolved into ash, scattered into the collapsing chamber. The fire spread fast now, no longer fueled by wood, but by memory and blood. Eliza turned, running toward the path of roots. The tunnel above shook as she climbed. Stones fell. Light blinked through. She reached the hatch just as it cracked. Strong hands pulled her out. Henry. Behind him, Thomas and James stood, eyes wide, bodies thin but alive. They helped her to her feet. The clearing trembled. Then the tree of hollow eyes split straight down the center. A column of fire shot skyward, and the glade ignited in a silent, blinding blast. The 4 siblings ran, the forest parting for them, trees groaning as centuries of silence shattered. Wind howled, carrying screams and whispers alike. Eliza did not look back. When they reached the edge of the woods, the fire behind them was gone. Nothing burned. Only silence remained. They stood in the field, breathless, skin streaked with ash. Above, the sky was clear, bluer than it had ever been. Henry fell to his knees. Thomas stared at his hands like they weren't his. James wept quietly. Eliza stood over them, the mark on her wrist now faded to scar. "I saw her," she said softly. "Odella. She was still there. She was the pact." "And now?" James asked. "She's gone." No one spoke. Then Thomas said, "You didn't trade yourself." Eliza shook her head. "I remembered. That was the key. Memory was what bound us, not blood." Henry looked toward the woods. "Will it come back?" Eliza didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the manor. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. Its shadow was gone. She looked at her brothers. "We're going home." And as they walked behind them, the clearing slowly closed, but deep beneath the roots, something ancient shifted in its sleep. The Morwood siblings crossed the village line as the sun broke across the horizon, casting golden light across the roofs of East Haven. For the first time in years, the mist was gone. It hadn't drifted. It had vanished, like a spell finally broken. They passed the old mill. The wheel turned again, creaking softly. No one was there to run it, but it moved just the same. At the town square, a child's voice called out. Gasps followed. People emerged slowly, faces pale, drawn, still gripped by fear. But then, from behind the crowd, a toddler appeared, dirty, barefoot, confused, but alive. The missing girl. The woman who had blamed Eliza fell to her knees, clutching the child. She looked up at Eliza from across the square. No words passed between them. None were needed. The Reverend Brant approached cautiously. His eyes landed on the three boys, older than the town remembered, but unmistakably the Morwood sons. James nodded. Brant removed his hat. "You brought them back." Eliza's voice was hoarse. "I didn't. They came back themselves." The villagers parted as the four siblings walked toward the manor. The gates no longer creaked. They hung open, silent and still. The ivy had loosened, vines curling back as if retreating. Inside, the hall smelled of smoke and earth. Dust remained, but the cold had lifted. Light touched corners that had long been dark. They moved through the house room by room, silent. The nursery untouched, the parlor quiet. The study, still holding the book of offerings, now blank. Every page. Eliza reached for it, opened it. Her name was gone, no ink, no mark. The ledger had closed. She left it on the desk. Later that day, Henry lit the hearth. Thomas opened the windows. James sat at the piano and played a single note. It didn't echo. It resonated. Eliza walked to the mirror room once more. No mirrors remained, only the seam in the floor, now sealed, as though it had never existed. She stood there for a long time, her reflection staring back from a single, unbroken pane of glass. Her own eyes, nothing behind her, no watchers. When she returned to the foyer, a sound met her ears. Laughter. Real. Joyful. Her brothers gathered at the dining table, arguing over bread and jam as though 20 years had never passed. She leaned against the doorway and watched them. It was real. They were home. Later that night, she stood at the gate. The villagers had returned to their routines, uncertain but lighter. East Haven had not spoken, but it had listened. Something had changed. The dread in the wind was gone. The forest stood quiet, not defeated but resting. Brant joined her. "They won't understand it all," he said. "Not yet." "They don't need to," she replied. "Let the old stories fade." He studied her. "What will you do now?" She looked toward the woods. "Live. Remember. Guard the silence." Brant nodded and left. Eliza remained a while longer. The stars above were clearer than she'd ever seen them. Not a single cloud. Then, without thinking, she stepped beyond the gate, walking into the field beyond the manor. The wind was cool. The trees did not whisper. She knelt in the grass and whispered something only the earth could hear. A thank you. When she stood again, the house behind her stood whole. Its shadow was no longer a curse, it was simply a home. She turned toward it, and the windows glowed warm with lamplight. No one watched her from the forest, no one followed her from the dark. Not anymore. 10 years passed. East Haven changed in quiet ways. The mist never returned. Children played in the streets without glancing nervously toward the woods. The townsfolk began planting gardens again. Bells rang on Sundays. And the Morwood name became something spoken without dread. The manor stood, worn by time but tended with care. Ivy trimmed, windows intact, chimney warm in winter. The siblings stayed for a while. James became a teacher, Henry a carpenter, Thomas the town's librarian. They aged slowly, as if the woods still stretched time around them. Eliza remained, but not always in sight. Then one day she vanished. No door left open, no sign of departure. Only her boots placed neatly at the back door, facing the forest. Her room was untouched, her bed made. The spiral on her wrist faded to nothing. People whispered, of course. Some said she'd gone deeper into the trees to watch over what remained. Others believed she had simply walked away, finally free. But then came the letter. A Reverend Brant received it first, delivered by a boy who claimed he found it beneath a stone at the chapel steps. The envelope was sealed with black wax, marked by the spiral symbol. He gathered the town that evening and read aloud. To those who remember, I leave this house not as a relic but as a root. Its foundations were born in darkness, but its walls now hold light. Do not fear its name. The forest sleeps again, but sleep is not death. One day it may stir. When it does, let memory be your first shield. Do not bury the truth. Speak it, softly or loud. Let the stories become lessons, not curses. To James, Henry, and Thomas, I leave my silence. It carried us. It protected you. Now let your voices rise. To East Haven, I leave the mirror whole. Do not shatter what reflects, only what controls. To the watchers, wherever they may drift, I leave the path closed for now. Yours in blood and fire, Eliza Morwood. The church was silent. Then a murmur, a sigh, a nod. The townspeople carried the letter to the manor and placed it above the hearth, sealed behind glass. Not as a warning, but as a memory. Years passed. The house grew quiet again, but not lonely. James passed peacefully in his sleep. Henry moved south. Thomas disappeared into books, speaking less but smiling more. Children came and went through the village, asking about the strange old mansion on the hill. Their parents told them what they could. And one girl, Lena, barely 8, began drawing spirals in the dirt behind the school. She said she saw someone in the trees, a woman in a red dress. When asked what the woman said, Lena answered without fear. She told me to listen. No one dismissed her. One morning, the townspeople noticed a candle burning in the manor window. No one had lit it. Inside, the hearth was warm. The dust was gone. The locket rested on the mantel, open. The portraits inside glowed faintly. And on the back of the mirror in the hall, written in a delicate, curling hand, was a final message. I am watching still, not to take, but to remember. The wind passed through the trees that day with gentleness, as if brushing pages closed. The Morwoods were no longer legend, they were legacy. The Morwood estate stands still, wrapped in time, yet touched by every season. In summer, its windows reflect golden skies. In winter, its chimney breathes warmth. But beneath the roots, far below the cellar stones and hollow tree, silence reigns. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of waiting. Because something remains. Deep beneath East Haven, a remnant lingers, formless, boundless, watching through cracks in memory. The observador is no longer whole. Its name no longer whispered, its altar broken, but hunger is not undone by ritual. It merely learns new forms. In the soil, bones sleep. In the leaves, whispers stir. On some nights, if the wind blows just so, you can hear the laughter of children where no children play. Lena, the girl who saw Eliza, now walks the edge of the woods alone. She speaks to no one when she goes, but always returns with drawings, spirals, trees with eyes, women without faces. When asked, she only smiles. She's showing me the old stories. And so, the tale folds back into the earth, becoming root again. Some say it was all myth, an old house, a grieving girl, a village shaped by fear. But myths are the bones of truth, and truth does not sleep forever. One night, decades later, a man passing through East Haven pauses at the gate of the manor. It's empty now, windows dark, roof sagging, but the air around it hums. He steps closer. Inside, the front hall is covered in dust, but the mirror remains untouched. On its glass, the spiral glows faintly just for an instant, enough to make him pause. Then he hears it. A knock. Not at the door. From below. He backs away slowly. Outside, the moon is thin. The pines sway gently. Too gently for a windless night. Something has shifted. The house remains, but houses hold memories, and sometimes memories knock back. Somewhere beneath the earth, a spark flickers, a spiral turns, and a door you thought had closed long ago begins to breathe again. If this story chilled your bones and stirred your soul, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more tales that walk the line between memory and nightmare, and if you dare, click the next video on screen, where darkness waits for those who remember or forget.